It was a small neighborhood, the kind that seemed to come straight out of a peaceful small-town story. The houses, lined up in perfect rows, had well-kept gardens and white picket fences that looked freshly painted every day. In the summer, children played in the streets until the sun went down, while neighbors exchanged friendly gossip about the weather. But despite this serene appearance, not everything was as it seemed. Amid that seemingly ordinary neighborhood, there was a hidden tension, something that couldn't be seen, but could be felt. At night, when darkness fell and the house lights went out one by one, the silence hung heavy in the air, strangely oppressive, as if the very night were holding its breath. It was as if the neighborhood was trapped in a bubble of forced calm, hiding something dark and inexplicable that lurked in the shadows of everyday life. At every corner, in every alley, there seemed to be invisible eyes watching, waiting, and the children? Oh, the children didn't know it yet, but they were about to discover that even in their safe homes, they weren't truly protected. Terror was coming, slowly creeping through the streets dimly lit by the streetlights. And no one was prepared for what was about to happen. That night, something different began to happen. A high-pitched, jarring tune sliced through the silence like a sharp knife. The children, who were still outside, froze. It was a familiar melody, but there was something deeply unsettling about it. It was the sound of an ice cream truck. But this was no ordinary ice cream truck. The approaching vehicle was old, with faded, rusted paint. Its headlights flickered as if they had a life of their own, casting dancing shadows on the quiet houses. The music it played sounded like it came from a cursed music box, and the closer the truck got, the more the children felt a chill run down their spines. The truck stopped in the middle of the street. Silent. Motionless. The side door opened with a creepy creak, but no one emerged. The children looked at each other, unsure of what to think. They felt that horrible combination of curiosity and fear, as if something inside them knew they shouldn't get closer, but they couldn't resist. From somewhere in the shadows of the truck, a pale, skeletal hand appeared, waving slowly. A face finally emerged from the shadows, a strangely thin man with dark, lifeless eyes and a smile that seemed fake, like it was drawn on his face. "Come get your ice cream," he said, his voice barely audible over the disturbing music. But there was something sinister in his tone, something that made the children's hearts race. The younger ones began walking towards the truck, like zombies being drawn by some invisible force. But as they got closer, the man retreated into the shadows again, leaving the door wide open. The inside of the truck was a dark hole, looking like an entrance to another place, a place where the sun never shone and hope couldn't exist. Then something flickered in the back of the truck, something that made the children stop instantly before entering. It was a faint light flickering like a beacon calling them inside. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. And deep in the hearts of the children, a voice whispered in unison, "Go home." Now, without another word, the children turned their backs to the truck and ran. The sound of the music faded behind them, but the feeling of being watched never left them. And as they ran, that fake, cold smile remained etched in their minds, a grim reminder that danger had just arrived in their peaceful neighborhood. The children ran home, slamming the doors behind them and locking them quickly. Their parents noticed the commotion, but when they asked what had happened, the little ones just shook their heads, eyes wide with fear, unable to form words. The next morning, calm returned, but with it came a sense of foreboding, like a dark cloud hanging over the neighborhood. The children didn't speak of the truck again, as if trying to forget could erase it from their memories. But deep down, they all knew that that macabre smile and disturbing music still haunted their minds. The following afternoon, After a brief rain that left the air heavy and humid, the familiar sound returned. The same sinister, shrill melody announced the ice cream truck's return. The vehicle parked on the same street, this time in a spot where the darkness seemed denser, as if the place was a blind spot in the daylight. The driver didn't immediately get out this time. Instead, the children watched from their windows, holding their breath and wide-eyed. They saw him wave again slowly, like a patient predator giving its prey time. One of the children, Gabriel, a curious and brave boy, decided he needed to see up close. Convinced that it was all a strange illusion of fear, he left his house, his steps sinking into the puddles left by the rain. His friends called out to him, but Gabriel just motioned for them to be quiet. When he was a few feet from the truck, Gabriel stopped. The driver was there, with those lifeless eyes and cold smile. "Would you like some ice cream, boy?" the man asked, his voice sounding like a whisper from a deep, empty cave. Gabriel hesitated, but his curiosity pushed him forward. When he finally reached the truck, the man retreated into the shadows again, forcing Gabriel to look inside. What he saw made him immediately recoil. There were no ice creams inside, only darkness, and at the back of that darkness, something moved, something alive and incomprehensibly wrong. A second later, the driver's pale hand reached out and tried to grab Gabriel's shoulder. But before it could touch him, a sudden force pulled him back. It was Gabriel's older brother, Lucas, who had followed him unnoticed. "Let's get out of here," Lucas shouted, dragging Gabriel away from the truck. As they ran, the truck's music grew louder, almost deafening, until both boys rounded the corner and, like magic, the sound ceased. The truck was no longer there. When they looked back, the street was empty, and the rain puddles remained. But Gabriel knew the terror was far from over. He had seen something in the driver, something beyond his physical appearance, a ravenous hunger, something that burned in his hollow eyes. That truck wasn't just an old vehicle. It was a roaming trap, and the driver, a lurking shadow, waiting for the right moment to strike. And so, the neighborhood's sense of security was shattered. The silent terror began to thicken, like an insidious fog that no one could dissipate. Gabriel and Lucas ran straight home, locking the door behind them with trembling hands. The sound of the ice cream truck still echoed in their heads, mixed with the sound of the rain continuing to fall outside. That night, as the children tried to sleep, their parents noticed something strange. The neighborhood animals, cats, dogs, even birds, seemed restless. Barks and meows echoed through the night, interrupting the silence in a disturbing way. At midnight, a scream pierced the air, followed by a deadly silence. The scream came from the Johnsons' house, a family that lived at the end of the street. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson woke up in a panic and ran to their youngest son, Ethan's room. When they opened the door, what they saw left them frozen in horror. Ethan was in bed, but his eyes were wide open and lifeless, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. Beside the bed, a small puddle of muddy water had formed, as if something had seeped through the walls. The neighborhood woke up in an uproar, parents rushing to check on their children, and in some cases, finding them in a similar state to Ethan alive, but in a state of paralyzing terror. When the ambulances arrived, the paramedics were baffled, unsure how to treat the mystery. In the following days, more children fell into this bizarre condition, while reports of a strange ice cream truck continued to circulate. People began to suspect, and instead of waiting for the authorities, some community leaders decided to act. A group of parents and adults determined to uncover what was happening formed. Among them, Mr. Martinez, a former police officer, took the lead. Armed with flashlights and cameras, they planned a night vigil, ready to face whatever came at that dreaded ice cream truck hour. That night, as the neighborhood slept nervously, the vigilantes took their positions at strategic points. And then, around 3 in the morning, the sound returned, that same agonizing, melodic sound. The flashlights immediately turned on, focusing in the direction of the music. The ice cream truck came crawling down the street, its shadowy form standing out eerily against the flashlight beams. But this time, the vigilantes were prepared. Mr. Martinez, with his police experience, signaled for the others to advance cautiously. As they approached the truck, it stopped abruptly. The side door opened slowly, and the driver, with his sinister smile, appeared. "What do you want?" he asked in that echoing, expressionless voice. "The music, the truck, all of it needs to stop," Mr. Martinez said, trying to sound firm. "What are you doing to our children?" The driver didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped back, leaving the door wide open once again. Inside the truck, a faint pulsating light began to glow, illuminating the interior enough to reveal rows of ice creams, or something that looked like ice creams. When they focused their flashlights towards the light, the vigilantes saw that the ice creams were actually encrusted in strange crystals, covered with an unknown substance that seemed to shimmer with life. And at the center of that creepy darkness, there was a device, a machine that clearly didn't belong to this world. The driver let out a cold, raspy laugh. They wanted ice cream. "I just gave them what they asked for," he said, slowly turning and disappearing into the shadows of the truck. Mr. Martinez ran into the vehicle, but when his feet touched the soaked floor of the truck, he realized he was in another place, a place of infinite darkness, where an ancient, insatiable horror awaited him. At that moment, the truck vanished, leaving the vigilantes stunned and desperate. And as they searched in vain for Mr. Martinez, one thing became clear. The neighborhood was trapped in a web of nightmares that tightened every night. The neighborhood was in a state of shock after Mr. Martinez's disappearance. The vigilantes returned home in silence, the weight of the mystery growing heavier on their shoulders. The children, already terrified, now looked at their parents with fear in their eyes, realizing that even the adults had no answers. The following night, the truck didn't appear, but the terror persisted. The affected children remained paralyzed, and the muddy puddles beside their beds became more common. There was a sense of hopelessness in the air, and everyone felt the tightening grip of an invisible presence. Gabriel, still shaken by what he had seen in the truck, decided he had to do something. Convincing Lucas wasn't difficult. He was also determined to find a solution. They knew they couldn't face the truck alone, so they discreetly spoke to other friends, forming a small group willing to confront the mystery together. That night, while the neighborhood slept, the children sneaked out of their homes and met at the old tree at the end of the street. Armed with flashlights, a neighborhood map, and Lucas's old video camera, they decided to patrol the area, hoping the truck would return. And as if the nightmare had heard them, the familiar music began echoing in the distance. The children prepared, their hearts pounding in their chests, and followed the sound. The truck was there again, parked under the dim light of a street lamp. This time, there was no doubt. They knew they had to be quick and cunning. As they approached, Gabriel raised the camera, ready to record everything. The driver appeared again with his sinister smile, but something in his eyes seemed hungrier, more desperate. "You keep coming back," he said in that raspy voice. "This is fun." Gabriel looked directly at the man, trying to maintain his courage. "What do you want from us? Why are you doing this?" The driver tilted his head as if considering the question. "Because there are things that need to be fed. And children," he smiled wider, "are so pure, so deliciously full of life. Before Gabriel could respond, the truck's door began to close. Instinctively, Lucas and another child, Sarah, pushed the door, preventing it from closing completely. The other children shone their flashlights inside, and to their surprise, one of the crystals began emitting a high-pitched, constant sound like a muffled scream. Something inside the truck began moving again, a shadow larger than any they had seen before. The flashlights started to fail, and Gabriel knew they had to get out of there. Now. He shouted, and they all ran, but not before capturing a few precious seconds of footage. The truck disappeared once again, leaving a cold mist in its place. Back in the safety of their homes, Gabriel and Lucas locked themselves in the room with the camera. When they watched the recording, they noticed something they hadn't seen before. Behind the driver, deeper in the truck than they could have seen with the naked eye, there was a presence. It wasn't just a shadow but a humanoid figure, whose skin seemed to glow with an unnatural light. "I think we know what we're up against," Lucas said. "But we need to understand how to stop it." The next day, they showed the video to the vigilantes, hoping to gain some advantage with the adults. When Mr. Bernstein, a local historian, saw the recording, his face turned pale. "This," he said with a trembling voice, "is something ancient, something I've read about in forgotten manuscripts. It's a creature that feeds on the fear and vitality of children." He pulled an old, dusty book from his shelf. "We need to find the place where they hide during the day and destroy the object that binds them to this world." The children and adults joined in a desperate effort. They knew the next night could be decisive. The key was in the ancient writings and their courage. The plan was simple but risky. Find the creature's refuge and destroy the artifact, thus freeing the neighborhood from terror. Time was running out, and everyone knew the real battle was about to begin. As the tension increased, an atmosphere of collaboration and hope spread among the vigilantes and the children. Based on the ancient writings presented by Mr. Bernstein, they decided to follow the clues that would lead them to the entity's hideout. The group split up to gather more information. Some explored the local library for forgotten books, others interviewed the neighborhood's old residents, and still others tried to trace the truck's movements using the camera recordings. Gabriel, Lucas, Mr. Bernstein, and a few others focused on deciphering symbols found in ancient tomes. Through a combination of patience, research, and luck, they discovered something crucial. The entity could be defeated if the bond that tied it to the physical world was broken. And that bond seemed to be related to the mysterious device inside the truck. The next night, prepared for the final battle, the group once again heard the shrill music approaching. This time, they knew what to do. Armed with tools and the determination to save their neighborhood, they advanced towards the sound. When the truck appeared, they didn't hesitate. The children distracted the driver, while the adults surrounded the vehicle. Gabriel, Lucas, and Mr. Bernstein were the first to enter the truck, illuminating the interior with powerful flashlights. There was the device, emitting a sinister, pulsating glow. The driver, realizing the group's intent, let out a malevolent laugh. But the children had learned and faced their fear with renewed courage. With a quick motion, Gabriel unlocked one of the toolboxes and grabbed a heavy hammer. He, Lucas, and Mr. Bernstein began smashing the device with all their strength. The machine emitted a horrible, high-pitched sound as if it were in pain. The driver tried to advance, but was pushed back by the combined force of the group's adults. "Finish it now," Mr. Bernstein shouted. Finally, a precisely aimed blow from Lucas split the device in two. A blinding, bright light filled the truck's interior. A supernatural scream echoed, and the shadowy figure twisted into an amorphous form before disappearing completely. The truck, like a deflated balloon, began to shrivel and eventually vanished in a cloud of dust and the sound of twisting metal. With the device destroyed, the bond was broken. Those paralyzed in their homes slowly began to wake up, freed from terror. The neighborhood felt an immediate relief, as if an invisible weight had been lifted. The next day, the community gathered to celebrate the defeat of the entity. Gabriel, Lucas, and the others were treated as heroes. Mr. Bernstein gave a speech, thanking everyone's courage and determination. And although the neighborhood gradually returned to normal, everyone knew that courage, unity, and vigilance could never be dismissed again. They had faced the unknown and prevailed, and the sense of victory and renewed security was tangible. From that day on, the streets once filled with fear were now filled with children's laughter and play. The terror no longer had a place in that neighborhood, and the memory of the ice cream truck became a legend, a story of bravery passed down from generation to generation. In the weeks following the defeat of the entity, life in the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. The recovered children were gradually getting back into their routines, and the once lost laughter filled the streets again. However, Gabriel, Lucas, and Mr. Bernstein knew that the fight against the unknown required constant vigilance. One afternoon, as Gabriel was reviewing the footage on his camera, he noticed something strange. There was an almost imperceptible pattern in the shadows inside the truck before the device was destroyed. He showed the footage to Lucas and Mr. Bernstein, who immediately understood the seriousness of the discovery. "I believe," Mr. Bernstein began, "that the device was just a piece of the puzzle. Those shadows, they might be remnants of the entity, or perhaps a clue to something bigger." Intrigued and somewhat worried, the trio decided to investigate further. Consulting old manuscripts and city maps, they discovered something alarming. The neighborhood was actually situated above a series of ancient underground tunnels. These tunnels were only whispered about in old texts as a possible temporary home for entities crossing between worlds. Determined to eliminate any remaining threat, the group organized an expedition to the tunnels. They gathered their equipment and discreetly informed a few trusted neighbors about the mission. That night, they ventured into the entrance of one of the tunnels, located in the forest at the end of the street. The tunnels were dark and damp, and the silence was broken only by the sound of their own footsteps. Their flashlights cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere of constant tension. After exploring several narrow and twisting passages, they reached a larger chamber. In the center, they found inscriptions on the walls and on the floor, a circle of ancient stones marked with faintly glowing runes. The circle appeared to be a portal or a ritual site. "This is the epicenter," Bernstein explained. "This is where the entity likely drew its power from. We need to destroy this circle and purify this place." They got to work immediately. Gabriel and Lucas used pickaxes to break apart the rune-marked stones, while Bernstein chanted purification incantations based on the old manuscripts. The air around them seemed to vibrate and fill with a strange electricity as the malevolent energy of the place began to release. At the height of the ritual, a cold wind swept through the chamber, and a deep voice echoed off the walls. "You cannot destroy me so easily," the entity said, its words reverberating with a menacing tone. But the group did not relent. They concentrated their efforts, and with a final blow, shattered the last stone of the circle. A burst of light filled the chamber, and a supernatural scream echoed as the entity, weakened and severed from its link to the physical world, was finally banished. Back on the surface, the trio was greeted as true heroes by the anxiously waiting neighbors. Once again, they had conquered terror, but with a clear lesson: the unknown always lurks, waiting for an opportunity to emerge again. They knew that although the entity had been defeated, ongoing vigilance was essential to protect the neighborhood. Thus, Gabriel, Lucas, and Mr. Bernstein became the first of a new generation of guardians, passing on the knowledge they had gained to future generations. The punishment of the tunnels was the last echo of the darkness they would face. The neighborhood was now a place of renewed safety and unity, where stories of courage and determination continued to inspire all who lived there. As the weeks passed and the neighborhood recovered from the confrontation with the malevolent entity, life carried on with a sense of renewal and hope. Gabriel, Lucas, and Mr. Bernstein still kept in regular contact, sharing the burden and knowledge of that extraordinary experience. As time went by, a sense of normality returned to the neighborhood. The children played freely in the streets, and the adults resumed their daily routines. However, a shadow of uncertainty lingered in the hearts of those who had witnessed the darkness. It was on a full moon night that Gabriel awoke with a strange premonition. A sense of unease gripped him, as if something was out of place. He got up and went to the window, looking out at the silent street. That's when he saw the tall figure standing at the end of the street. A dark silhouette, barely illuminated by the moonlight, silently watching the houses. Gabriel's mind immediately flashed back to the entity they had faced in the tunnels, but something about this figure was different. Without waking anyone, Gabriel decided to go down and investigate on his own. The figure remained still, as if waiting for him. As he approached, Gabriel realized it wasn't the same entity, but another presence, less threatening, but equally intriguing. "Who are you?" Gabriel asked, his voice echoing in the stillness of the night. The figure turned slowly, revealing a pale face and deep, sorrowful eyes. "I am Elena," she replied, her voice soft and laden with melancholy. "I am a guardian, just like you." Intrigued, Gabriel invited her in to explain her presence. Elena told her story, revealing that she was charged with protecting the passage between worlds and that the entity they faced in the tunnels was only a small part of a much larger evil. Elena explained that fragments of dark energy were breaking loose, threatening to cross into the living world. She needed Gabriel, Lucas, and Mr. Bernstein's help to contain this threat before it became uncontrollable. With a heavy heart and a sense of duty, Gabriel agreed to help Elena. He knew the neighborhood still faced unknown challenges, and he was determined to protect it, no matter the cost. That night, while the neighborhood slept peacefully, Gabriel, Elena, Lucas, and Mr. Bernstein gathered in secret to discuss their plan of action. The darkness had not completely vanished, and a new journey was about to begin. Gathered at Gabriel's house, he, Lucas, Mr. Bernstein, and Elena discussed at length the dark energy fragments and how they could prevent them from crossing into the living world. Elena brought with her ancient maps and detailed notes, revealing the existence of several critical energy points scattered throughout the neighborhood. These points, Elena began, are like small wounds in the fabric of our reality. Any disturbance in them could open portals for entities. We need to seal each one before something worse appears. They decided to split into two teams. Gabriel and Elena would check the points north of the neighborhood, while Lucas and Mr. Bernstein would handle the points to the south. Armed with protective talismans and Elena's instructions, the group set off on their mission, aware of the importance of their task. The night was especially cold, and the silence seemed to carry an unbearable weight. Gabriel and Elena reached the first energy point, an old tree that had witnessed generations of stories and secrets. Feeling a pulsing energy there, Elena prepared the talismans while Gabriel stood guard. This place, "Do you feel something different, Gabriel?" Elena asked. "Yes, it's as if everything is in suspense. Waiting," Gabriel replied. Elena began the ritual, tracing ancient runes with salt around the tree, murmuring words in a language Gabriel could barely understand. Suddenly, a cold wind blew, and the shadow of something malevolent tried to emerge. With speed and precision, Elena cast one of the talismans directly at the energy point, and the disturbance began to retreat, dispelled by the light of the talisman. They decided to continue immediately to the next point, knowing that every minute was crucial. They arrived at an old well, half covered by vegetation and forgotten by time. There, they found another concentration of dark energy. Elena showed Gabriel how to use the talismans, and he took hesitant steps to begin the ritual, feeling a growing power as he traced the runes. Meanwhile, on the other side of the neighborhood, Lucas and Mr. Bernstein faced their own challenges. They had reached an old playground where the malevolent presence was strong enough to make the shadows seem to dance on their own. Lucas held the talisman firmly, feeling a kind of pulsation that seemed to increase as they approached the core of the energy. Mr. Bernstein, with his accumulated experience and knowledge, took the lead in the ritual. Meticulous gestures and well-timed chants slowly calmed the energy of the playground. The moment the last rune was drawn, a soft glow enveloped the place, dissipating any remaining evil. Reunited again at Gabriel's house, they realized they had successfully sealed all the critical points. However, the night was far from over. "Do you feel that?" Elena asked, frowning. "Even though the points are sealed, the darkness hasn't completely gone. Something is still here, watching, waiting." Gabriel felt a chill. "It means we'll have to stay vigilant. This battle may have been won, but the war isn't over," Elena agreed. "Yes, but today we've taken a big step. With determination and unity, we'll continue to protect our home." And so, the sense of unease began to be replaced by renewed determination. Gabriel, Lucas, Mr. Bernstein, and Elena knew they needed to remain alert, ready to face any threat that approached. The neighborhood had gained a new hope, based on the courage and strength of its guardians. Gabriel, Lucas, Mr. Bernstein, and Elena decided that to maintain vigilance, they needed a more structured plan. They set up a sort of headquarters at Gabriel's house, with detailed maps of the neighborhood, records of paranormal activities, and a shared schedule to monitor any signs of disturbance. They spent days training, perfecting the rituals, and creating more protective talismans. Elena instructed them on different types of entities and signs that could indicate a malevolent presence. They learned to work as a cohesive team, each with a specific role: Gabriel as the protector, Lucas as the strategist, Mr. Bernstein as the sage, and Elena as the spiritual guide. On a particularly quiet night, while reviewing the records at the headquarters, Gabriel noticed something strange on the maps. There was a pattern in the arrangement of the critical points they had sealed. "Look here," he said, pointing to the marked locations. "It seems to form some kind of design, like a seal or a symbol." Elena frowned, looking closer. "This is a containment sigil, but it's incomplete. We need to find the central point to complete the seal and permanently lock away the main entity." After hours of investigation, they realized that the central point of the sigil was located where the old train station used to be, now abandoned and full of legends about mysterious disappearances. They decided to act immediately. Equipped with talismans and the necessary tools, they headed to the train station. The place radiated a sense of abandonment and melancholy, as if it was frozen in time, waiting to be awakened. Walking through the deserted platforms and dark corridors, Elena led the group with determination. They reached the heart of the station, where a large clock had stopped working decades ago. Elena felt a powerful and malevolent energy there, and everyone agreed that this was the central point they had been looking for. They prepared the ritual, arranged in a circle around the clock. Gabriel and Lucas guarded the perimeter, while Elena and Mr. Bernstein worked together to activate the containment seal. But as the ritual progressed, things started to get complicated. A malevolent presence, realizing the containment attempt, began to manifest. Cold winds and distorted shadows rose from the ground, trying to interrupt the process. Gabriel, standing firm, used the talismans to ward off the shadows. Lucas recited reinforcement incantations while Elena traced the final runes with precision. Mr. Bernstein, with his calm and experienced voice, chanted ancient hymns, directing positive energy against the darkness. The final battle was intense. The malevolent presence tried everything to break the circle, but the union and determination of the four guardians kept the barrier intact. When Elena finally placed the last talisman in the center of the clock, a bright light filled the room, causing the malevolent presence to dissipate with a scream of rage and frustration. The train station, once shrouded in negative energy, was now filled with a sense of peace and relief. Gabriel, Lucas, Mr. Bernstein, and Elena sat exhausted but victorious, knowing they had achieved something extraordinary. "The seal is complete," Elena said, taking a deep breath. "The main source of evil has been contained. But our vigilance must continue, for there is always a risk of small breaches." Gabriel nodded, looking at his friends. "We're ready. Our mission is far from over, but now we have the confidence and knowledge to face anything that comes." Together, they left the train station, returning to the neighborhood with a new sense of security. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to protect their home against any shadow that dared to approach again. Did you know that the smartest decisions are based on quality information? Subscribe to our channel and become part of a community that values knowledge and personal growth. Receive exclusive content that will transform your perspective on the world and learn something new every day. Click the subscribe button now and start your journey towards continuous improvement.